Yeah. So there you go. So what that means is if your name in the corner of each person's Zoom picture will not be shown on the recording, but if you don't want your image to show either, please turn off your camera. Our Zoom event manager tonight is Luke Phillips. Luke, please place your email address and phone number in the chat in case anyone needs to get a hold of you with technical questions. And here is the game plan for tonight. First, Susan Bergeron will introduce and speak with the movie's director, Brian Oldenburg. Then Cameron Swallow, let's see, enable, will, oops, hold on, trying to get, there we go. Cameron Swallow will introduce and interview two former Wisconsin state legislators who are joining us tonight, Dale Schultz and our own Susan Bergeron. After that, we'll have a Q&A where the audience can ask questions of the film director and the two former state legislators. We'll follow that with an audience poll and then ask audience members to answer questions we ask of them. And I will now, it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderators, Cameron Swallow and Susan Bergeron. So let's tell you a little bit about them. Cameron Swallow is the Blue co-coordinator for Braver Angels in the state of Wisconsin. She has been moderating Braver Angels workshops since 2018 and is currently working with the Music and Arts Committee for the national organization. She is from Tennessee originally and moved to Kenosha, Wisconsin in 2017 when her husband became president of Carthage College. She teaches middle schoolers in an after-school program, serves on several local volunteer boards, and plays with the group bluegrass band Flat Creek Highway. Now, Susan Bergeron is the Red co-coordinator for Braver Angels in the state of Wisconsin. She served on the Grafton, Wisconsin School Board from 1981 to 87 and was a Wisconsin State Assemblywoman from 1984 to 1994. She proudly attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So Susan, you're first, and so over to you.
Right. Thank you for the introduction. And I just want to add, I majored in political science when I was in school. Let's see, I'm to introduce Brian Oldenburg. And I watched his amazing movie, film about the swing state and also about the road to friendship. And I understand Brian has quite a history in filmmaking. Started out in radio and is kind of got a lot of capabilities that he brings with him. But most of all, the in-depth research that went into both of those videos that he films that he produced. And so Brian, I just want to start out with a question to you, and then you can make your remarks from there. What interested you so much about Wisconsin politics that you decided to make a film about it?
Well, thank you very much for the wonderful comments. First of all, I want to thank Donna for her wonderful help here, getting me into my first Zoom. And Cameron, who actually showed my film over at Carthage College. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it that evening, but and so I'm a slightly bit apprehensive tonight, just this is my first Zoom, but I just want to say that I've always been interested in politics, Wisconsin and Illinois in particular. I live right on the state line here up in Wisconsin. We have Chicago to 2 hours to our south, and we have Madison right here about 45 minutes to my north. And I've always found those two places very fascinating for politics. I do remember back when I was young going up to UROC, the very place I saw Dale and Tim speaking during the event that I had in the movie. And back in the day at UROC, I remember distinctly listening to WBBM, WGN, and really enjoying political discussions. I remember hearing Mike Royko speak about his book called Boss, about the machine politics of Illinois. I also found national politics very interesting. I ended up getting a political science degree from Beloit College. And Madison in particular, we have nicknames for Madison. One is
Yes.
Madtown for various reasons. And one is, well, it's been described a lot of different ways. Let's just put it that way. And the people in Madison basically, in my estimation, are the Democrats there are much more liberal. They make the liberals in Chicago look conservative by comparison. And so anyway, I've always found those two cities very fascinating, Chicago and Madison. And I confess, until I got into a lot of this film work, that I didn't know enough about my own state, the various other parts of the state. So I did learn a lot about that. And in a nutshell, to kind of hurry this along, I found the last two elections kind of anomalies, in my lifetime at least, in their contentiousness. I can't remember two elections that have been this unfriendly, let's say. And so I was interested to see if my fellow Wisconsinites thought the same thing. I set out to just give both sides an opportunities to speak equally in a journalistic fashion, which seems to be kind of vanishing from our society now, just, getting both open opinions. And so that was my goal, to ask fellow Wisconsinites what they thought happened, and is friendship still possible in our country? And to sum up, I also thought that this would make a good documentary, a video history of Wisconsin for a certain period of time. It'd be interesting to look back at some time. And I also thought this had a really good cast of characters. Donald Trump, the ex-reality star, Hillary Clinton, the kind of the career, somebody who'd been in politics all her life, married to a very popular president, and Bernie Sanders, who years ago might have been considered definitely out of the ordinary. I mean, when he first started, I remember him, if not being made fun of by even his own party members, just kind of being quite eccentric. So I knew that there were going to be some interesting characters in this particular film and in the second 2020 election. So basically, the only other thing I can say is growing up, I always agreed with the idea that blessed are the peacemakers, not blessed are the hate mongers or blessed are the dividers, but blessed are the peacemakers. So in a nutshell, I guess that's what I was interested in here.
Very good. I do have a question, just in your opinion, what do you think is the biggest cause of the polarization that we see in the state and nation?
Well, at this particular point, the biggest issues, well, I have to agree with Tim and Dale. Dale is with us tonight, about money reforms. I definitely believe that it is a big issue in politics, out of control right now. I do believe the term limits are a problem. We've had certain politicians in there for 40, 50 years, which I don't think the founders ever meant. I agree with them on the redistricting reforms that are necessary, gerrymandering, that is, to hopefully be taken care of. I mean, ultimately by fair, I would say, judges to draw the lines, and I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I mean, the Democrats do it, the Republicans do it. And ultimately, I'd love to see somebody draw, just equal type of lines. I don't like in Iowa. I remember seeing in that discussion up at UROC that a judge had drawn the lines there, and he just packed the state up, in little squares. So I think personally, I think the media is a problem in our society and in journalism. I'm finding it that, like I said with my movie, I tried to lay things out evenly on both sides. I'm finding journalism to be somewhat wanting nowadays. Most journalism is based on conflict, I believe. The old saying, if it bleeds, it leads, unfortunately. And I listened to Jonathan Haidt the other day, who I'm sure you're all aware of, speaking of maybe the government somehow could offer incentives, some sort of monetary incentives that, would cause some sort of new organization to form that would present both sides of an issue, both sides of an argument equally. I think right now I agree with Jonathan Haidt and Jonathan Rauch. I saw them on an interview recently where both liberals who were talking about how the universities need to dial it back as far as some of the current policies right now. They need to, in their estimation, I'm sure they're doing a wonderful job at Carthage. I'm sure Cameron and her husband are doing a wonderful job there. But by and large, they were talking about how some of the administration has to put the foot down, be stronger, and stand up to a lot of the current forces, and actually help band professors together so that they can fight back against a lot of the cancel culture.
Well, Brian, if I can just interrupt you, those are all really interesting thoughts. And I'm just going to say that, Braver Angels, Foot in the Water is really teaching people how to have meaningful conversations about issues where you work to identify the points rather than beat the person, or best the person next to you. I mean, it's,
Sure.
Civility is just one, journalism, entertainment, politics, you name it. So I don't want to step on your toes. I thought those were all great ideas, and thank you so much for being with us here, and feel free to
thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm
turning it over now to Cameron, right?
Oh, okay, Cameron.
Unmute. Hello, everybody. I'm very glad to see you and to meet the people who are from Wisconsin. I love being from Wisconsin, as I have been able to say for the last 4 years, but you can hear in my voice that I'm not from there. I am pleased to introduce two retired elected officials, but they are pretty busy for being retired anything. And you've already heard Susan's introduction. I know Susan because we are the red-blue leadership pair for Braver Angels locally in Wisconsin. But Wisconsin knew Susan before I knew Susan, and she had 10 years in the Wisconsin Assembly. Let me read to you about Dale Schultz, who you saw in the movie, is a Republican and served as a Wisconsin state assemblyman from 1982 to 1992. So that's 10 years like Susan, and there's some overlap. Oh, right, when he was a state senator from 1991 to 2015. Okay, so there's two pieces of service there. He was the Senate Majority Leader from 2004 to 2006. He's now a farmer and a businessman and proud to have attended the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Oh, there's something else you have in common. I'm sorry to hear that Senator Tim Cullen is not able to join us tonight. He and Dale have been working together for years now for their project across the party lines. And I'm sorry that we don't get to see them together tonight, but Dale, you can speak to the project, and Susan, you can speak to politics in Wisconsin, and I intend to learn a lot tonight. My first question for you is, how, as politicians or retired politicians, how did you learn about Braver Angels, and what do you see as the intersections of Braver Angels work and the work that Tim and Dale are doing across the party lines?
I'll take that first because it's a pretty obvious answer. I learned about Braver Angels because they sent me an email or something like that, and I read it, and it hit me right away that this is what our country needs: is learn how to be civil and decent to each other, both in local politics and national politics, and neighborliness in their community. We've just fallen so far away from the standard of civility that we once enjoyed. And it sounded like a method to get people thinking about that, to teach them how to have tough conversations. And I think what I've been able to see so far as Cameron's co-director is making some progress, but there's a lot more work out there to do. I love what Donna's doing about the politics. That should be a very interesting project. I went from politics to ministry. In fact, I was in seminary while I served in the legislature. So it was kind of a interesting career path. So I received this email, and I read it, and I said, this is what we need. And I immediately sent them a check and joined. And then just kind of, I really wanted to go to that first convention, and I got sick and couldn't go. I had my plane tickets and everything. And, but just kept in touch. And I think Donna gave Cameron my name. I'm not sure how Cameron found me, but I think that was it. And
Yes.
Red
Yes, we have Donna to thank.
I'm the balance. I'm the balance in Wisconsin. I am the red balance. So, well, yeah. That's how I sorry, Dale.
Dale, how did you learn about Braver Angels, and what's the intersection from what you've learned with the work you and Tim are doing?
Unmute.
Okay, I thought somebody else had done. I'm sorry.
That's it.
I got an email, but prior to that, I had seen a reference to Braver Angels in a number of articles that I had read over a period of a couple months, and it sort of registered with me, but not enough to really push me into doing much investigation. And all of a sudden I got this email, and next I knew I was being asked to join this program, and I said, fine. Tim and I have done, we stopped counting a long time ago when we passed the 100 mark of speeches around the state of Wisconsin on the subject of gerrymandering, trying to educate people at first what it was all about, you know, with the history lessons with Eldridge Gerry, and all the way up to the point where in the last couple of election cycles, we introduced analytics to voters, got them to understand about the enormous amount of data that was being collected on them and the impact that that would have, and how it was being used to manipulate the electorate. And when we started out, almost nobody knew what gerrymandering was. And now we're at a situation in Wisconsin where 70% of the population is in favor of reform. They do vary from, you know, place to place and exactly what kind of reform. Tim and I have sort of embraced the Iowa model that was first introduced by a all Republican legislature in Iowa and Governor Robert Ray, that has never had a bill introduced to repeal it. It's been wildly popular. And we now have a situation, as I said, 70% of the people in favor, 80% of the Democrats, 60% of the Republicans, and the independents in most polls fall somewhere in the middle. It's been a hoot to watch people turn on to this issue, become educated, become motivated, and it's been fun to see people, grab the horns and start their own local groups to start lobbying for it. And it's just been a lot of fun. I was a part of a group with Tim that took the gerrymandering all the way to the United States Supreme Court. I won't go into that, but it was a very bitter pill to swallow when the court decided that they didn't have a role to check the power of the legislature. But the court, is not final because it's right because it's final. They told us to go out essentially and convince the public. So we just hung with it and we continue to do that. And it's our hope that at some point we will get rid of something that has become more and more powerful now in Wisconsin, provides about a 10% advantage to the party in power. And it wouldn't matter whether it was Democrats or Republicans, that same advantage probably would be there. Yes, Republicans have done it, Democrats have done it, but it doesn't make it right, because in the end, what it does is it cheats people of the power of their voice, their vote, and that's wrong. And that's what causes a lot of frustration in our society. And we're not afraid of listening to other people. We don't always agree with one another, Tim and I, but we do think there's great value in listening and learning and working together. And this has just been a joy for both of us.
Thank you, Dale. Thank you for that work, and thank you for doing that work in a bipartisan way so that it sets that example and that precedent for the rest of us. Next question. Braver Angels has a new initiative. It's called Braver Politics. And so instead of just the grassroots citizenry trying to work across the partisan divide, we are planning deliberately to get elected officials and their staffers to participate in Braver Angels workshops, town halls, debates, all kinds of Braver Angels events. And the goal is that people do this in public and speak about the good effects of such events in public. And the question for you two elected officials with that kind of experience, what advice would you give to Braver Angels to maximize the participation of elected officials at every level in Braver Politics?
Susan, would you like me to go first?
Go ahead.
During the period of time I was in the legislature, I represented a district that was probably slightly Republican, 52 to 55%. I regularly won with 75% of the vote to 65% of the vote. And the secret to that was I ignored party dictates that you follow a list and only talk to Republicans. My attitude was, while I was proud to be a Republican, I was there to represent everyone. And I wanted everyone to know that. And nothing says you care like being there. So if you knock on somebody's door and they go, hey, wait a minute, I'm a Democrat, I don't really want to talk to you, you can say, I'm here. I'd really love to hear what you have to say, and you can let it all hang out. I know you'll feel better, and I might learn something. And over a period of time, people felt comfortable talking to me. And all I had to do was listen and to show a little respect. And what I got out of it was that I really did learn that I had friends everywhere. I just had to take time to meet them. And that's contagious, and it works well, and it worked great for me. And like, as I said, it made me one of the best vote getters in the state.
I'm going to tighten the screws on this question before I turn it to Susan. Dale, that's an inspiring story about your past. Today, conditions are very different. how do you think Braver Angels could get today's elected officials to enter a workshop that's going to be about party line crossing and finding common ground if there is any? How can we encourage today's politicians to do that willingly?
I would advise that you don't lead with current politicians, that you lead with other people, new people, young people who want to run for office. I had a young man who I didn't know stopped to see me this last week. And like a lot of people who stop and seek my counsel, wanted to know what I thought about running for office and wanted to pick my brain. And, I told him right up front, I don't know whether you can win, but it doesn't matter because the journey is going to be worth it. And I told him early on when I was interested in politics as a young man, I was involved in something like 40 straight election losses. I wasn't always the candidate, but I learned to take defeat, and I profited from each and every one of those races and the people I met. And I said, when I ran for this office, I was one of two people, I think, in the state that no one expected to win, and I did win. And the prescription was pretty simple. I just knocked on every door 3 times and begged people to give me a chance and was willing to answer their questions. So I tell them, go and do that, and recognize that you will be a better person and a more interesting person for having done it. And then I tell them solemnly, don't put any of your own money into it. I've watched too many people get ruined. But that's where I would start. And, once the parade starts, believe me, the sitting politicians will kill each other to get in front of it. And when that begins to happen, that's when you grab them and ask them to show a little leadership. And I think, the more impact will be had that way than rather than trying to start with it, because crusty old politicians learn how to handle nice people.
Thank you. Thank you, Dale. Susan, anything to add for Braver Politics?
Yes, I do think that it's essential that we start contacting people at the state and federal level and even the local level that are in government, and personally, go and visit them and say, we're working for Braver Angels is working to try to bring people together and get past this this block. It's preventing so many things from happening that people won't talk, that legislators won't talk to each other. The one in power dismisses the other one. I mean, that's the way, and we have to get past that. It isn't even good for the politicians themselves. And so that would be one of my first efforts. I also think it would be good to get in universities. Congratulations to you, Cameron, for getting it in Carthage. But at the University of Wisconsin, I think Braver Angels chapter, Braver Angels chapter would go a long way. I think it would be really exciting for some of those kids. So working with the universities, with high schools even. As Dale mentioned, getting people while they're young, but to really get the legislators to change their way of dealing with one another. Two-pronged attack, try to get some friends in the legislature that would be willing to host a workshop, and try to get their colleagues to attend, and also try to elect people that are familiar with the whole Braver Angels concept.
Thank you.
I want to add, Cameron, if I might, I always talk to people that oppose me. People would call up or write me letters and then call them back and, saying, how can you do this, and you're a horrible person. You probably got letters like that, not many, Dale, everybody loves Dale. But when, I was kind of on the more conservative side, now I'd be called a moderate. The party kind of left me, but I would talk to them. I would listen to them. I wouldn't talk to them. I'd listen to them. And I'd tell them I understand how they feel. I see it in a different way, but I'm glad you shared that with me, and get them to talk some more. And by the time they hung up, they said, I really, really appreciate you hearing my point of view. And so that when I was serving, I also suddenly figured out that if I wanted anything done, I needed the Democrats, because I served in the minority the whole time. And I had, great success working with Becky Young. Dale, remember Becky Young?
Certainly do.
And then Gwen Moore and Becky and Roberta Darling and myself made some changes in the welfare reform bill. And just working with them just showed, but it was great. They loved it. I loved it, because I could actually get something done. So yeah, but you come in with the attitude that you need to work with the other party to get things done.
Right.
You can't just
Thank
force it. You're welcome.
Donna, I know that we need to move on. I want to work in the question about Stephen Olikara, but I can do it in my next segment if you want to move on to the next part.
Yeah, I do want to say we're having some feedback issues, so if everybody could mute themselves unless they are talking, that would be helpful. And also I wanted to say that Braver Politics, which we've been alluding to, will be launched officially at a member meeting in November. Okay. Yeah, it's going to be really exciting, but more on, stay tuned about Braver Politics. So Cameron, let's go ahead and move on, and let's see if we can weave that in maybe later on if need be. Okay. And you're on mute now, Cameron.
Just following instructions, Donna.
Yeah, but you're the moderator. Okay.
So we're going to start with a poll. You're on.
Oh, well, okay. So let's see how I do here. Here's the poll. So I'm launching a poll question, and you're gonna. The question is, what is the biggest cause of polarization? It's a single choice. So you go ahead when you see it and choose one of the options, and we'll see what we think is the biggest cause of polarization. So I'm launching it now. And can you see the poll, folks? Okay, good. So go ahead and make a choice. So far, 16 people have answered. About half the people on this call. Keep going. Come on, folks, choose something. That's right. Keep going. Okay, you can't choose. Okay, I'm gonna give you about 7 more seconds.
I can't interact with the poll is what I mean.
Yeah, I can't either.
Maybe, you know what? Maybe it's because you're co-hosts. I bet that.
Probably.
Yeah, that's why. Okay. Okay, I'm closing it in 5 seconds. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to share the results. So can you see the results, everybody?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so you see that your largest choice is social media and cable TV, 38%. Then you said identity group politics, 25%, gerrymandering, 17%, political sorting, 13%, and super rich ideological donors, 8%. So the winner is social media and cable TV, but of course there are many other reasons as well. Okay, so back to you, Cameron, and
Okay.
you're going to be doing a Q&A with our And well, how about, well, anyway, back to you.
Okay. So this is the part where everybody gets to participate. Since there's more than one screen of us, I am going to ask that if you wish to participate, you raise your mechanical hand. And down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can open your participant window and get your mechanical hand, or there may be a raise hand button in your Zoom control bar, depending on which Zoom version you have. Okay.
Yeah, and lastly, it might be under your reactions too. If you might have to click on reactions, and it might, the raise hand might be one of the reactions. It just depends.
Okay. Thank you. And the first question is, how did we become a society where we feel like it's culturally acceptable? It's the norm. There's nothing we can do about it for people to be so mean and nasty to one another. And my first raised hand response is Janet. Unmute yourself and speak to the question, Janet.
There, I think it's right.
Yes, good.
How did we become so mean and nasty to one another? Well, I think this goes way, way back to racial issues, other issues being different in any way, shape, or form. And I think that Trump just opened the door for it to be more normalized. I mean, it seemed like it was okay to be mean to each other. And prior to that, I don't think it was so okay. I'm not happy about that. I think it's awful that we have difficulty just talking to each other and being able to disagree, but still be friends. It seems to me we should be able to do that.
Thank you, Janet. Second, final response to this question, and then it is Susan's turn to ask a question. Stuart and your companion.
I don't disagree with what the first respondent said about the politics of division, but I think what amplifies that and has made that politics of division so possible is that I would posit that we now live not in an information age, but a disinformation age. And that's what makes it so possible for Trump to have succeeded in the types of politics and the type of politics other people have picked up on this and are utilizing those methods and playing on the politics of division and on people's fears and dividing people into camps in order to succeed. Because we no longer have the same basic facts. It used to be that we're just, no, hey, it was ABC, NBC, CBS News, we all listened to it. We would have political discussions and we might have different perspectives, but basically we were working from the same fact, a very similar, if not the same fact base. That's not as true today. Nowhere near as true. And I think that's a big piece of the puzzle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Susan.
Oh, over to me.
Wait, excuse me. I'm sorry. We skipped a part here. I apologize. We're going to do a Q&A from the audience too. Brian, Susan, and Dale. Yeah, remember? And some people have been asking about that. So we do want to give people.
So sorry.
That's okay. We want to give people an opportunity to ask Susan, Dale, and Brian questions about the film or anything else they want to ask about. So, and Cameron, I think Cameron, you are the facilitator of that. So go for it.
Well, forgive me, everyone. I was reading my words, not your words, where I was going next. So please think of a question having to do with the film that you've all watched that you can pose to Brian, the director, or Dale, one of the participants, or Dale and Susan together as former politicians in Wisconsin. Janet, is your hand still up, or is it up for a question about the film? I will come back to you, Janet, because I do see a new hand. I'm going to ask Ellen to unmute and ask her question.
I was wondering, Brian, after the two groups of people, the Democrats and the Republicans, agreed to meet again, and you had a joint discussion, do you know what happened afterwards? Because they seemed as if they might be a little more open to interacting again.
It
Unmute.
was,
Unmute. Right there we go.
Thank you.
You know, I was wondering that myself. I had to contact some of them afterward to get their names spelled correctly in the credits, and to get other information from them. And it was, all I know is one of them had moved away to Texas, the gal with the cowboy hat. You know, life had moved on, and unfortunately she had gotten a divorce. And as far as the others, I know Harry, the one Democratic fellow. I don't know if he lost his job for any connection with, you know, changing his mind over his politics or what have you. But I do know he ended up somehow losing his job downtown, disagreeing about certain things. And I don't know if he became more bipartisan and people got a little angry with him. I recall him losing his job. As far as the other ones go, I did send out a few emails to the one gal out of the four who was a Democrat, and I never got a response from her. I was curious how life had moved on for her, and I was wondering the same things that you were, how, you know, they seem like they might become friends and get on together, you know, in various ways, but I just I just don't have enough information, you know. So I guess that's all I can say. I'm not really sure. You know, I couldn't get a hold of the gentleman, the Republican, either. So I did try.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, we all want the epilogue for, you know,
Yeah.
20 years later, this is what happened. Next question is coming from Carol Lee. Unmute yourself.
Thank you. I was wondering, Brian, did you think that the participants in friendship were talking to each other, or were they talking to you through the camera? Because they expressed their different positions, but they didn't seem to try to address their differences. How did you feel as the moderator there in terms of how that was going?
Yeah, I've had other people express that as well. People are different once they get on camera.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably a mixed bag for me. I do think some of them were genuinely shocked, actually, when I told them that some of the Republicans actually had said that, you know, the other side, you know, they've got some really nice people over there. And so the Democrats were like, you know, I remember them very, very surprised at that. And so were the Republicans. You know, the Democrats had said the same thing in some of the interviews, that, oh, it's a shame, you know, there's some really nice people on the other side. So at least I think they were open to the other side, but I truly couldn't gauge. It didn't seem like they were being phony on the air. They truly seemed to be themselves. So I think there was a ray of hope that each side talked nicely about each other. You know, I don't know. I can't remember if I included that, some of their comments in the film actually. So I guess that's all I can say.
Thank you.
Thank you. John is next.
Good evening. I'm a Minnesotan. We're in some people's minds a swing state. I don't know that I believe it, but I think related to all this is the topic which I don't think has been talked about, and that is that the furthest out ideological people in the Democrat and Republican Party have captured the endorsement and primary process, mostly because I think people in the center, like I assume most of us are, I'm a Rockefeller Republican, and I'm now a center-left Democrat, and I don't think I've changed my mind about policy at all over 40 years or 50 years. But how can we deal with this hyperactive right and left wing who capture the caucus system in Minnesota, the primary system in other states? That to me is at the heart of the divisiveness at the moment.
Who would you like to direct your question to, John?
Open, anybody could answer.
It seems to me that the extremes in both parties make the most noise and get the most press, and it causes us to forget all about the middle. Nobody is interested in what the purples think, but we have a contingency of conservative Democrats, relatively conservative Democrats. About 20 to 25% of the parties sit at the extreme ends, and everybody else is in the middle. And I just don't know how we can get the middle to realize the power they have if they would come together. That's my thinking on it. Everything we do reacts to the extremes, extreme right, the extreme left, and right now we need to focus on the purple, because I think that's where the salvation to all of this is going to come from. And what we need is a leader to step forward that can articulate and has the money and whatever, maybe even to form a third party.
Thank you, Susan. Brian, I see you trying to answer, Brian.
Yes, in the movie, I'd actually gotten a question from a friend from Beloit College, an archivist, who asked me, do you think a strong centrist party is even possible? And the journalist in the second film, Craig Gilbert, actually said he didn't think so, for various reasons, that the extreme polls seem to be the most active. The 70% of the other people are too busy with life. And I'm just wondering, I'm wondering myself if a big centrist party under the leadership of a young, attractive person like Steve Olikara could in fact, or somebody on the other side, a moderate Republican could in fact lead the center of the 70% of people that, are too busy with life, to get involved in the details. I'm more optimistic than Craig Gilbert myself. So I'm more optimistic about that, Cameron.
Thank you, Brian. Since you brought up Stephen Olikara, I'm going to step on Dale here for a second. You can still address this question, but I want to make sure everyone in the Zoom room here knows that Stephen Olikara, who was in the film as the founder of the Millennial Action Project, the young man from Wisconsin who's trying to bridge partisan divides by getting millennial politicians and elected officials at every level to find what they have in common sort of generationally and find common ground that way. That same young man is now running for Ron Johnson's Senate seat in Wisconsin. Now, we can't say that he's running directly for the seat yet because he still has a big Democratic primary to go to first. But with that context for the whole Zoom room, I want to ask these Wisconsin folks, Brian and Dale and Susan, what do you think are Stephen Olakara's realistic chances in Wisconsin?
Let Dale go first.
I honestly would say he'd be a decided underdog simply because he's probably going to lack the resources in the way campaigns are conducted these days. If you don't have $2 or $3 million to just start, you're in deep trouble. You know, in the last 20 years, the world has changed a lot. We've seen the decline of newspapers, which forever sort of set the tone about discourse in national and state politics, local politics. We've seen the rise of talk radio, which, you know, is meant to be shocking and entertaining, appeals to the worst of people. It doesn't matter whether it's right or left. And it sort of taught people that, oh, it's okay if you just let it all hang out. You have a right to do that. And that has helped change norms. Then you add to that Citizens United and the McCutcheon decisions, which opened the floodgates and took away the power to limit campaign finance spending. And you open the door to the super wealthy, along with, you know, in Wisconsin, taking away the $10,000 limit. And suddenly a very few people are running the show. And if you want resources, you're expected to toe the line because the investor class really wants a parliamentary system, not a system that we inherited in this country, which sort of encourages independence. They want a strong, strict party. And they've largely succeeded because of these changes that have occurred along with social media, which has allowed them to pick apart voters' opinions and to bring to bear the massive resources they have. And, you know, the political office holders have sort of knuckled under because, you know, they want to keep their jobs or they think they have something to offer. And if they're not there, they know they won't have a chance. So, you know, those things all have to be addressed and overcome. But again, you know, what is the prescription for changing any one of those? What we're doing right here. And what that young man is talking about doing, which is becoming the man in the arena. And, you know, that's what, you know, my hero, Teddy Roosevelt, said. That's who gets the credit, the person who gets bloodied up and beat up for the right reasons. And I think what we can and should be doing is finding young people like this and supporting them.
I would just like to add that, first of all, Ron Johnson still hasn't declared whether he's running or not, which would make a whole different picture. There might be a primary against him, but I think I don't know, he could go either way. He's not been making much sense anyway lately, to me at least. So who knows what he'd do, but I would just love to see that candidate like that take off. And when you have a big primary, Dale, anything can happen. Anything can happen.
I got elected in a primary of 8 people.
You'd see, anything could happen, Dale. You're living proof. So, yeah, those are my thoughts.
A prediction about Stephen Olakara, Brian?
Well, I just wanted to say that he has built quite an organization, Millennial Action Project. I don't know what his fundraising potential is. It's probably surprising. I feel that he holds more weight in the fact that he not only talks the talk, but he walks the walk as far as bipartisanship. I mean, he's like Dale, he's like Tim. You know, when they come in and they give the inaugural speech, and you know, I don't care which side it is, and we all know they're probably not going to be bipartisan, then you sit back and question. But Steve Olakara actually has walked the walk. He at least listens to the other side. And he's very passionate. You know, his comparison to a jazz band, that we all need to be ourselves, yet, you know, play the instruments in a whole. And so I think he's young, he's charismatic, he's you know, an attractive guy, and I think he might surprise a lot of people. I mean, that's my prediction.
Thank you, Brian. We will take this last hand-raised question from Rebecca before we return to Susan asking questions of the audience in the Zoom room. Rebecca, unmute yourself with your question.
Thank you. I don't know who can best answer this, but when I'm watching the section in Milwaukee on the film, that comment was made that compromise is a lose-lose and dissent is a building block. And I was struck by that comment, and I'm just wondering if it's okay to ask if somebody could explain that a little bit more to me or comment on that. Compromise is a lose-lose, but dissent is a building block. And what we need to do is teach the skill of dissent. Can someone expand on that thought a little bit for me, if that's okay?
I'm not sure what was meant by that comment, but I grew up with a different metaphor in the legislature, and we used to say a half a loaf is better than no loaf. If you're hungry, a half a loaf looks pretty good. But if your intent is radical change, then you don't want people to become partially satisfied. What it seems to me you're trying to do is create edginess and conflict. And if your goal is a much more radical politics, I guess that might make some sense. But I was always more interested in doing what we could to help the Lord divide the loaves and fishes and feed the poor.
And I understood that compromise is the way that you build policy together with the other side. And like I said, I was in the minority, and so was Dell while I was there. And if you wanted some changes, you had to find a Democrat that's willing to work with you. And I think that whoever made that statement was just dead wrong. And it explains exactly what's wrong with us now. It explains exactly what's wrong with us now. Politics is the art of the possible.
Thank you. Oh, Luke. I haven't seen a question from our Zoom manager before. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
Well, I was actually just wondering, would it be in place for me to mull a little bit on the quote that was just mentioned?
It's fine with me, Luke.
Thanks. So I'll try and keep this short. And I'm in a loud place at the moment, and so I'm not. So I will try to keep it short to save everybody's ears. But I've never heard that quote before. I've heard things somewhat like it. I find it fascinating. And I guess at some level I don't have, and by the way, I'm like a mushy normie Republican in name only, kind of like moderate myself, right? So I don't come at this quote from the perspective of some kind of wild-eyed radical. But I do find it interesting and compelling on the at a level of what we do in Braver Angels for one very specific reason, which is, I think, the notion that compromises lose-lose, dissent is constructive. I take on that second part, dissent is constructive, dissent is a building block, really seriously, because I think while the task of politics in terms of governance, in terms of legislation, in terms of building new things and building a public structure is based fundamentally on compromise and always must be, I don't think that that's all of what politics is. I think there's also a part of politics that's fundamentally about coexistence and not destroying people who are on the outside of whatever those compromises wind up being. And so it seems to me that at some level, if you can find out ways to dissent well, right? If you can figure out ways to dissent productively or ways to dissent against compromise, against the general mainstream of what everybody else thinks, but dissent in a way that can be either enlightening the discourse in general or can be being the most honest version of what you yourself are. That is something that might not be compromised, and it might often go against compromise, but it also is something that is an integral part of the American political tradition itself as well. And in Wisconsin, I'm reminded of the great dissenter, Robert La Follette Sr. and his son, Robert La Follette Jr., who obviously were never in the mainstream of the political institutions, and yet who by their great dissent were able to push for things that people in both parties eventually, decades later, wound up realizing, wow, that Fighting Bob was onto something after all. So at some level, I think that quote is fascinating to me because it just reminds me of the complexity of politics. And sure, was it said possibly by somebody who was being uncharitable against centrists? Maybe. I didn't see that part, so I don't know. But I wouldn't dismiss it quite so easily, because I do think in our political order, there is not only just a place for dissent to be building blocks, but dissents to be central parts of the order that does include compromise and consensus building as well.
Well, there's obviously dissent if you're going to have compromise. I mean, there has to be two sides that don't agree on something. And, and one side, if either side says my way or the highway, compromise is totally shut out. There is no chance. So I understand your point, Luke, but, I see it as the way politics are now. That quote is what's wrong with politics right now.
Well, Susan, the floor is going to stay yours. We need to turn from the questions that the Zoom room is asking to the questions that we ask of the Zoom room, and it is your turn.
Woohoo! And I never have questions on this seat. Okay. We're beginning a new, did you just do that one about braver politics, Carmen?
Yes, down at the very bottom, Susan. Your question is about polarization.
Polarization. Why don't you just take it, because I can't find it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Too many documents on one screen. Susan's question is, how should our nation, different levels of politics, how should we address polarization? Chance for grassroots answers to important questions. How should we address polarization?
Sounds like nobody has an answer. Oh, here's a couple hands.
Susan.
Yeah, let's see.
Well, Susan will answer this question. Go ahead.
And we'll start with Susan.
Hello there. I think, okay, how do we address polarization? I think that what people said earlier makes a lot of sense. And Mr. Oldenburg in particular saying that, when you have the money in politics, then it's more divisive because everybody has to rally around that or lose funding. They have to rally around their party's platform, which, whether it makes any sense or not, whether they agree with, there's no independence allowed. So number one, I don't know how to do it, but we really need to work on getting this big money out of politics.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Get the money out of politics.
Yeah.
Next is Diane.
I'm going to.
I'm sorry.
Diane, hi.
Hi. I think because gerrymandering is so pervasive in Wisconsin and other states, I think it's very hard to change the top. So I almost think it's a community effort of people talking to one another, neighbors talking to one another, people just not buying into the party's will. I don't even know if that's possible, but I think it's a ground root change versus the top.
I like that, Diane. I do. Sarah, you unmute yourself. And what's your question?
Yeah, thank you. So picking off where Diane just left off, one of the things we're trying to do here in a very, very blue part of New York State is to intentionally ride against the wave of screaming blue. Which by that I mean start at the local level. We as citizens, whether we are Braver Angels members or not, can intentionally encourage other local citizens to run for public office, who we know are much more moderate, who respect bipartisanship, who respect the notion that, you know, 2 points of view and that kind of tension needs to be there in American politics for there to be balance, and where there needs to be, some sort of equilibrium. And so I'm seeing that many of my friends are now encouraging their friends, just local lay people, to run for the school board, for example. Start small, to run for public office, school board, city council, but handpick people that you believe do have those kinds of qualities that will lead to greater compromise and greater bipartisanship. So this is again a ground up sort of approach, rather than seeing who is running for office, can I support him or her?
They're very good ideas. Thank you.
Yeah.
Rebecca, your hand up. Unmute yourself.
Just to add to that, I do believe very much in grassroots, but I also think, in responding to this question, that I would like politicians and political parties to really become honest with the electorate and really call out when their lies are being said and are not challenged, and ask people to really consider critical thinking and looking through things that are being said. I was told many years ago, and have been told several times since then by a politician, that the role of the majority party is strictly to stay in the majority, and the role of the minority party is to get into the majority, and that kind of rules their thinking and their policies. And if that is the case, I think that has also led to some of the polarization, because I should speak for myself, political action being based on what do I need to say and do to get myself elected and to get reelected. And that to me is not being truthful or faithful necessarily to your electorate. So if people could be honest about that from the top down, and we add that to the grassroots growing up, I think both would be important.
Thank you, Rebecca. That good comments. So any other questions responses to the question? Otherwise, I'll turn it back to Cameron.
Thank you. Phyllis, did you want to speak to this one? Sorry.
Unmute yourself. Yeah. There you go.
I just wanted to say, going back to the poll you took, the majority was social media, and I believe it was advertising. I'm not sure exactly what the other option was up there. But I think, and we can see with what's going on now with Facebook being scrutinized, and they even said they go for the most outrageous comments. They want that for advertising. It was also mentioned tonight. The extremes make the most noise. They get the most money. Advertisers go, oh, people will watch this, so I'll advertise on there. And I think the only way, a good way to start is ban campaign advertisements. Have them be written out instead of these 30-second sound bites. They take the most extreme thing that a candidate might say. They might be saying something very positive, but they'll take out one little sound bite that makes them sound like they're against the thing they were talking pro for. So that's just one of my things. I think political advertisements have to either be proven that what they're saying is true, or don't put them on social media and don't put them on television. If they're going to do a political advertisement, then they have to buy time and do like maybe a 20-minute infomercial. So you hear the whole platform that the candidate is talking about. And the opposing party can't pull sound bites out and throw them back in your face. So thank you for listening to my comment.
Thanks for the answer. And I might just add, you might run into a little problem with the First Amendment and limiting what people can say. You know, that it's a blessing that cuts two ways, that we have the freedom of speech, written speech and oral speech. And I guess even call money a thing of freedom of speech, because they call money speech because you can buy speech. So, but your comment is right on, Phyllis. Thank you for it. Now I'm going to turn it to Cameron, and I won't say anything else.
Thank you, Susan. My question is a related theme, and I hope to hear some new voices speaking to it, since we do have 2 screens worth of people here tonight. It's sort of in the category of culture eating strategy for breakfast, right? Making policy changes is a worthy goal, but to really change the culture like we want to do with a grassroots effort, how do we get people to feel like unselfishness is cool again, civil discourse is cool again, move away from the selfishness, move toward communitarian beliefs and working for the good of the whole? How could we operate to encourage that culturally? And I see Susan.
Just really quickly, I've wanted to say this to somebody for a while. And it really is just simple for me that we really have to have politicians who are not divisive, who are not encouraging people to be divisive, who are not putting everybody down all the time and making enemies of everyone. We need leaders who are not divisive.
Yes, thank you. Let's find the ones who aren't even thinking about. They should encourage them to be that. Donna, I see your hand.
Okay, here's my idealistic suggestion. The last movie that we saw before this one was called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 1939 classic by Frank Capra. I want you all to watch it if you haven't watched it yet, or if you haven't watched it recently. Watch this movie. It is about an idealistic young man who's put into office to fill out the seat of somebody who's died. They put him in because they think they're going to be able to roll all over him, and they're just going to eat him up for lunch. And the thing is, instead, he's such an idealist. He has such a good character. He has such a good heart that instead he ends up affecting the most cynical people around him. He brings out the best in people. And that's the kind of leaders I think that we need, and the kind of role that Braver Angels can play, and the role that each and every one of us can play, is instead of bringing out the worst in people, which I see happening a lot these days in politics, bring out the best. Watch Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Mr. Smith revival coming up nationwide. Next hand I see is Stuart.
I was going to speak. I was going to say, I think this is not a solution necessarily, but I think for all the reasons we've been discussing today, we've lost this idea that we're a community, right? That we're all in this together. We've become a group of others, we're othering each other. We don't see each other as having a common destiny and a common identity as Americans. So that has to be addressed, maybe at the grassroots level, maybe at the level of politicians, and maybe at many levels, right? To me, I see that as, and I think it was Janet who said this about our identity politics. I see that as a big problem in our political discourse right now. And unfortunately, our leaders win by playing on those differences.
Looking for how to emphasize that one community. That is a great challenge. We have not heard from Sally. Speak to us, Sally. Unmute yourself.
Alrighty, thanks. I'm going to echo or advance the runner to second on that. I think totally we've forgotten that we belong to each other completely. And part of it is the deterioration of community and what makes up community structures, right? I'm United Methodist clergy. I think the median age of the churches in my annual conference is probably 68. Nothing wrong with that. And when I'm there, I skew it heavily. But no one goes. We don't join anything anymore. We don't get together on anything. When I was a kid, it was Little League, it was Scouts, it was whatever you did. We don't do that in community. We don't come together, and there needs to be some concerted effort to bring people together for a cause that's not politically motivated. It's just, we're coming together. Maybe it's the local high school football game. In Pittsburgh, you ask people where their identity is, and literally, I don't care where you are politically, to a person, they will say, I'm part of Steelers Nation. And we are. And we come together around that something. Maybe you're a Packer backer, a cheesehead. I don't care what you are, but think of something that brings us together, because the more fragmented we become and the more that we don't have a sense of connection or belonging and total lack of community, that's just downright frightening to me. And that, with the pandemic, this isolation, you can literally have people not being seen or heard from and then say, oh, so-and-so passed on, who knew? That's a problem. We've got to find ways to reconnect and rejoin each other on the basic community level.
Thank you. Thank you, Sally. And Sarah.
Yes, there is a demographic that we haven't discussed yet today, and that is the young citizen, new voters, new potential voters. By that I mean secondary school and post-secondary education. See, if we just rely on our demographic, we are dead in the water. We really need to groom and teach young people, possibly through the avenues of civic education. This is participation in government in New York State is very much part of the curriculum. These are credit-bearing courses on methods of discourse that in fact promote, how to make a bargain, how to compromise, why both sides are important. If we don't build this pipeline of young people who are going to be the citizens of the future, we're really just spinning our wheels. So I strongly believe in moving Braver Angels into educational contexts, secondary school, post-secondary education, because this is where the rubber hits the road and we have to think of our future.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes. And looks like you're going to wrap us up here, Janet. Last comment.
I totally agree with what was just said. And my thinking was, we in Wisconsin, we have lost so much within our educational system. And I mean that in terms of financing, what's available, resources. But I think the greater good of the community is not being addressed. And even just classes of government and how our government works, we need to understand that and be a part of that. And I just think that we've lost, it's become an I, me, what I need, what's good for me, and I don't much care about you. And that is scary, it's frightening to me. And I think it needs to be addressed in all aspects of society, education being a huge part of that.
Yes. Thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, y'all, thank you all so much for your engagement and your interest in our local Wisconsin political scene, our local documentary by our local documentarian, and our local political leaders. I'm going to turn the conversation back over to Donna for some sense of what is next for Film Club and Braver Angels.
Great. Great. So thank you kindly to our moderators, Cameron Swallow and Susan Bergeron, and to our special guests this evening, Brian Oldenburg and Dale Schultz. And thank you also to our Zoom event manager, Luke Phillips. Let's give them some jazz hands, shall we? Thank you. Our next Film Club event will be on November 23rd at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, when we'll discuss the short 2021 documentary, Other Side of the Hill. It explores the impact of climate change in Eastern Oregon. Now that's the more conservative and rural part of Oregon, and how its rural residents are addressing climate change. Thanks to all of you for attending, and good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna, Cameron, Susan.
Stay on, Brian. Stay on, Brian.
Okay.
Okay. And okay, here we are. So we have a tradition after our events at Braver Angels where we kind of share the top headlines for us in terms of how this meeting went and what went well, what could be improved for next time. So
Okay.
that's what we're going to do right now. And so Cameron, can we start with you?
I'll read the script better next time and not jump to the end when we're supposed to have the audience participation. But I thought that the Wisconsin specific topics and questions were a big plus in this discussion.
Great. Susan.
I was pleased with the questions and responses from the people that attended. They've been thinking about this a lot before tonight. Some of them have been, and obviously they share the concerns that we all have about how to fix what seems to be broken right now.
Okay, thank you, Susan.
And I appreciated Brian's illumination of your and friendship happened in Wisconsin.
Thank you.
Okay, Luke.
I agree with everything that's been said so far. I think it went well on an engagement level, and the Wisconsin focus was fascinating for that. The only slight yellow light I have is I wonder to what degree during audience engagement, things went to a very large variety of topics, which is a good thing in itself. I wonder to what degree that was helpful for the purposes of the film discussion and the Wisconsin discussion itself. But I think that did at the very least give the audience engagement kind of side a boost as well too. So.
Okay, thank you, Brian.
Well, I have to say, I apologize, my friends. I really felt very self-conscious on this, my first Zoom. I really did. I felt awkward. And so I felt I could have been perhaps more myself, which is, like when Donna and I first Zoomed together, how to put it, a little more friendly, I suppose. I felt awkward tonight. So that's what I think I could improve. But I thought the comments were really nice. And I have to throw in one quick comment that the gal you were talking about the dissent comment, that was actually Robin Vining. And Susan, you might find it interesting. She too had gone through seminary. She actually was a pastor as well as a professional photographer before she got into politics. So anyway, I found her comment puzzling too about the dissent, although I think what she was talking about was dissenting. I agreed with a lot of what Luke said. I had a hard time interpreting that too, as I did kind of Steve Olikara's comment about the same. I think she meant what I interpreted, dissenting from the normal hatred, the normal, fighting. I found her to be very loving, very refreshing. And so anyway, I wanted y'all to know that that she was one of my favorites actually in the film. And her comments there kind of puzzled me too. I don't think she meant anything ill about compromise. I just, it was just kind of awkward how she phrased that, Susan. I don't know. So I'm with you guys on that one. I was a bit confused too.
And that was picked up out of context tonight, if I go back and listen to the film again.
And it came from my listening to both extreme left and extreme right radio programs, getting into that habit just to get, extreme views and balance it out. And I would hear on the extreme left, they're talking about, civility, it's just code word for they just want us down. They just want to put us down and keep us down. And then I would listen to right-wing radio. For instance, the late Rush Limbaugh would say compromise is, basically